Champlain's fighting for the Indians. One unwitting act of Champlain's lost the French all chance of expanding southward. He accompanied the Algonquin in a war party against the Iroquois in 1609. Two being shot by him, the Iroquois fled, and the Algonquin roared with laughter at seeing the enemy so easily routed. But the French were henceforth to find the powerful Iroquois unalterable opposed to them in New York. On this trip, Champlain discovered the lake named after him, and in 1615 became the first white man to see the Great Lakes. Mammoth. In the history of natural world to the supernatural, I found many weird things. But just because I don't know what it is doesn't make it supernatural. While the true heart of science is to always question even yourself. In the end, I have become an objective atheist. I am an atheist, but I want there to be more. In 1580, the Stroganoff family sent a band of Cossacks to hunt down a group of bandits in Siberia that had been stealing from the mines there. The leader of the expedition, Yermak Timofeyevich, reported that beyond the Ural Mountains he met a large, hairy elephant. The natives told him that the kingdom of Siber considered the giant animals as part of its wealth. They were valued as food, and the name, when translated, meant mountains of meat. Colonel Fowler lived for 12 years in Alaska from 1877 to 1889. Once asked of the most interesting thing he had seen there, he told them that after leaving Kodiak for a trip to the headwaters of Snake River, where his traveling agents had established a trading station with an Inuit village, he began negotiating for the purchase of a big lot of fossil ivory of several thousand pounds, which his tribe had stored near the village. After subjecting the ivory to a rigid inspection, two of the largest tusks had been found with fresh blood and traces of the remnants of partially decomposed flesh. It seems that a party had encountered a drove of monsters about 50 miles from where he was then encamped, and had succeeded in killing two, an old bull and a cow. They had nearly reached the hunting grounds when their ears were suddenly saluted by the chorus of large, loud, shrill, trumpet-like calls, and an enormous creature came crashing towards them through the thicket. The ground fairly trembled beneath its ponderous footfalls. Fowler went on to claim that Alaska's recent governor, Swineford, had decided that large herds of these animals were to be found above the Snake River, and the news raced around the world. Then in 1899, Henry Tuchman actually killed an Alaskan mammoth. So stated newspaper headlines. The Father of Cryptozoology, by Bernard Heuvelmans, has a chapter in his book on the track of an unknown animal. This chapter includes an extended section on the accounts of M. Gallen of what he was told in 1920 by a Russian witness who spoke of finding tracks in 1918, and eventually observing a fairly large, heavy-tusked elephant like animal in Russia. Movement also included references to a large hairy elephant, reported as being seen by the late 16th century Yermak Timofeyevich, leader of the Cossack expedition in Ural Mountains. This one actually, which I gave you a piece of earlier, is quite extensive and goes on for quite a bit. So if you're interested, do look it up. It goes on almost daily, like a journal of different things going on, some related, some not. The interest sometimes is finding what is. I pulled out the strongest bit of evidence and the information on it. According to natives, they claimed it was commonly part of their meat and happened at the time when the Slav world had never heard of the mammoth. I actually found long and detailed stories of these examples, and more so than with many other cryptos. So for this one, I definitely would say check it out yourself. This just gives you a few names and that started me on the expedition to looking through it through the different sites on the web. From what I found though, I do believe the mammoth made it further along in time than we thought. And if we really want this one, we really actually can clone it out, or at least we're getting close to that, because we do have the DNA to do so, kind of like with the thylacine. Except for in this case, they were nice enough to die in the ice, so we actually recovered bodies, frozen. It was a smaller one, but still the DNA's there. And you don't find this in many other animals, so it makes you wonder just how far they did make it. I mean, the cavemen are said to have hunted these things, so they made it past the meteorite and all that, definitely, because, well, they weren't dinosaurs. So, but we kind of just lumped their end in with them. And they were actually a much later age. It's not impossible. Some would say when you're flying overhead with a plane, you'd see them over the tundra or over the snow. They might get coated with the snow. They might give a more grayer color. They're going to do what they need to survive over evolution. But I believe if they did, they may not anymore. We have a habit of that, kind of like the dodo. I think it was another one of those that survived for a while until we finally finished him off. Thank you.
Hello, and if you've enjoyed some of our work that you've seen here, please do me a favor and click there over on Patreon corner, and you can become a patron, and for like $1 a month you can give me input on anything that you think would be good to continue on. So we do so much different things, and it's hard to see what people want to see next, so become a contributor as well as have an opinion on what we do next. Thank you.
Joliet and Marquette on the Mississippi. If France failed to win all America except the coastal fringe of English colonies, was in the end due to two factors. Too few settlers came to her settlements, and French sea power, the only method of communication with the new France, was surpassed by the British. Two noted explorers of the Golden Age of exploration were Father Marquette, a Jesuit, and Joliet, a trader. They pushed beyond Lake Erie, descended the Mississippi to Arkansas in 1673, and then turned back, fearing that the news of their great discoveries would perish with them at the hands of the Spaniards.
Jesuit Brebeuf. The arrival of the Jesuits gave impetus to expansion in New France. These fine men came to convert the Indians and to advance the fur trade for their country. They were successful with the Algonquin and the Hurons, but the Iroquois were implacable. Many of these French missionaries were killed, including Brebeuf, after excruciating torture. Following the Jesuits came the Ursulines, a teaching order, and the Hospitalians, or nurses. The Recollets were present before the Jesuits, but their 10 years of missionary work convinced them that a richer, better organized group was needed to carry on. I would appreciate if you could please go over and click on the subscribe and hit the notification so you can know next time we have something new coming on. And sorry for the interruption, but back to the show. The thunderbird. In the history of natural world to the supernatural, I found many weird things. But just because I don't know what it is doesn't make it supernatural. While the true heart of science is to always question even yourself. In the end, I have become an objective atheist. I am an atheist, but I want there to be more. Either thunderbird, pterodon, pterodactyl. The term is used in cryptozoology to describe a large bat-like creature, generally identified with the thunderbirds of Native American tradition. Similar cryptids reported in the Old World are often called rocks. Thunderbirds are regarded by a small number of researchers to have lizard features like the extinct pterosaurs, such as the pterodons. Reports of thunderbirds sightings go back centuries, and the fossil record does show the giant birds, pterotorns, with wingspans of 12 to 18 feet, were likely contemporary with early man. Today, the creature is generally regarded as a myth. In the middle 1830s, Don Pedro Carrillo purchased the land around La Laguna del Diablo and built a hacienda, barn, and corral by the water. He disregarded the superstitions about the place, but just 3 months after construction of his ranch was completed, he abandoned the place. He stated that there were supernatural beings nearby and refused to live there. The land remains idle for the next 2 decades, and even after the Americans came to the region, the lake was shunned as a cursed spot. Some years later, Don Chico Lopez settled on the property, and what occurred next was told in a manuscript by Don Guillermo Montesero, who was a guest at the Lopez Ranch. According to Don Guillermo, a great agitation took place during his visit. Around noon one day, Lopez's foreman, Chico Vasquez, rode up to the hacienda very upset. He told of strange happenings at the lake, and everyone saddled their horses and rode out to the shore. They arrived to find the water calm and quiet, but Lopez began berating his foreman for bothering them with their foolishness. Then stopped as a terrified scream came from the same bush at the edge of the lake. The plants whipped back and forth, and the account stated that they were so close to whatever was lurking in the brush that they could smell its foul breath. The men were startled when their horses reared up, and they began running in fright. As they brought their horses back under control, the men turned and looked back to the lake. Silhouetted against the sky was a large creature with enormous wings. The creature flapped them over and over again as it tried to rise from the mud. It soared and screamed and churned the water all around it. The horses and the men fled in panic. The next morning, all of the Vasqueros on the ranch were mustering armed and sent down to the lake to investigate. There was no sign of the winged monster, but it was said that the smell of it still lingered in the air. In 1883, the Lopez horses and cattle began to vanish. At first, bears or wolves were thought to be responsible, but then one night, there was a terrible uproar in the corral. When the Vasqueros came running, they found 10 mares and fowls had been slaughtered. They said that outlined against the sky, they saw a huge flying creature as it flapped away into the darkness. Don Chico Lopez promptly sold out and moved away from the area. Then in 1886, the newspaper reported more strange happenings at Lake Elizabeth. The reporter stated that a creature had been feeding on cattle, horses, sheep, and chicken, and had caused terror and excitement among the local inhabitants. On one occasion, the beast had tried to devour a large steer, but as the animal bellowed and kicked, the sound attracted the attention of its owner, Don Felipe Rivera. The steer put up a fierce fight and managed to free itself. The angry creature then retreated, but not before Rivera got a good look at it. He said that it was at least 45 feet long and had wings that laid flat on the back when not extended. He pursued the monster as it started towards the lake and fired at it with his Colt revolver. Rivera said that when the bullets hit the monster's side, it sounded as if they were hitting a great iron kettle. There was a story that in April 1890, 2 cowboys in Arizona killed a giant bird-like creature with an enormous wingspan. It was said that it had a smooth skin, featherless wings like a bat, and a face that resembled an alligator. This description has some similarities to that of the prehistoric pterodactyl, an animal whose existence was known at the time. They were supposed to have dragged the carcass back to town, where it was pinned with wings outstretched across the entire length of a barn. A picture of this event may have been published in a local magazine, the Tombstone Epitaph. But Don Felipe was nothing if not enterprising, and he made immediate plans to try to capture the creature and sell it to the circus. He even signed a contract with the Sells brothers, who agreed to pay him $20,000 to deliver the beast to him alive. Don Felipe never managed to capture the creature, although it was reported seen several times in 1886. The creature was last seen, according to Harris Bell, winging away to the east. Since then, he wrote, it has never been seen in any native valley because it was found and killed 800 miles from Lake Elizabeth, as approved by the article that appeared in the Epitaph, Tombstone, Arizona. Bell then goes on to quote from the article, which he apparently saw and provide details of the story. However, he does not say the event occurred in 1886. As many believe, he provides a follow-up story which is about the Tombstone article that appeared in the Los Angeles newspaper in 1890. For this reason, it's safe to assume that the thunderbird, if it really existed, was killed at some point between 1886 and 1890. The article states that 2 ranchers sighted an enormous flying creature in the Arizona desert between Whetstone and the Huachuca Mountains. The beast resembled a huge alligator with an extremely elongated tail and an immense pair of wings. According to their story, the creature was greatly exhausted and was only able to fly a short distance at a time. The men who were on horseback and armed with Winchester rifles pursued the creature for several miles before getting close enough to open fire on it and wound it. The creature then churned on the cowboys, but due to its exhaustion, they were able to keep far enough away from it until a few more shots could kill it. An examination of the creature showed that it measured 92 feet in length and that its greatest diameter was about 50 inches. It had only 2 feet situated a short distance in front of where the wings joined on the body. The beak, as near as they could judge, was about 8 feet long, and its jaws were set with strong, sharp teeth. They experienced some difficulty trying to measure the wings as they had folded up underneath the body of the monster after it had fallen, but eventually unrolled one of them It was an incredible 78 feet in length, giving the beast a wingspan of about 160 feet. The wings were as thick, nearly transparent membrane that had no feathers or hair on it. The wings was relatively smooth, though had been easily penetrated by their bullets. The ranchers cut off a portion of the wing and took it with them, perhaps as proof of what they had seen. After arriving in Tombstone, they spread the word of the creature and made plans to return to the site where it had fallen, and they had to skin it. They planned, the article stated, to offer the hide to eminent scientists for examination. They returned to the site to bring the creature back to town. And here the article ends. There are no details of the body being brought to town and no mention whatsoever of any photograph being taken. The story of the Thunderbird was relegated to the ranks of creatures like the jackalope until 1963, when the story was revived. In May 1963, an issue of Saga, a man's magazine of the day, writer Jack Pearl recounted the story of the Tombstone Thunderbird, along with some large bird sightings of the early 1960s. Not only did he tell the story, though, he went one step further. He claimed that the Tombstone Epitaph had, in 1886, published a photograph of a large bird nailed to a wall. The newspaper said that it had been shot by two prospectors and hauled into town by wagon. Lined up in front of the bird were 6 grown men, their arms outstretched. Fingertip to fingertip, the creature measured about 36 feet from wingtip to wingtip. Among the most controversial reports is a July 25, 1977 account from Lawndale, Illinois. About 9 p.m., a group of 3 boys were at play in a residential backyard. 2 large birds approached and chased the boys. 2 escaped unharmed, but the third boy, 10-year-old Martin Lau, wasn't so lucky. One of the birds reportedly clamped his shoulders with its claws and lifted Lowe about 2 feet off the ground, carrying him some distance. Lowe fought against the bird, forcing it to release him. In 2002, a sighting of a large bird-like creature with a wingspan of around 14 feet was reported in Alaska. Anchorage Daily News reported witness describing the creature like something out of the movie Jurassic Park. Scientists suggest that the giant bird may have been a Seller's sea eagle, which have a wingspan about 6 to 8 feet. There's also been previous reports of similar creatures in the same area around that time. The paranormal reality series Destination Truth traveled to Manakatak in 2009 to search for the creature. As recently as 2007, sightings have been claimed in the area around San Antonio, Texas. Some cryptozoologists have theorized the ancient Thunderbird myth to be based on sightings of a real animal with a mistaken assessment of its apparent size. Keep in mind, birds strong enough to lift a small child off the ground do exist. Luckily, they are rare, and they don't show a desire to do so. So it is not impossible for Thunderbirds to exist. I actually think that this story may relate, at least the most part of it, to one of the last of a mated pair that did exist. If it is another of the dinosaurs that survived, a little more difficult to take, but still, as the last of very few, I will accept it. Ask the buffalo how well we treated them when we showed up. Thank you.
Radisson and Grosvenor in the west. Champlain was followed by Nicollet, who explored westward to Lake Michigan. At one point in his journey, Nicollet, thinking he neared China, dressed himself in ceremonial robes. A quarter century later, Radisson and Grosvenor followed him and explored Lake Superior. Later, transferring their allegiance for a while to England, they were instrumental in establishing the Hudson Bay Company's lucrative fur trade. The age of expansion, in which France claimed by right of original exploration all territory from Hudson Bay to the Gulf and west to the Rockies, had begun.